Scripture reading this morning will be from Mark chapter 6, verses 1 through 6. After raising Jairus' daughter, Jesus, went away from there and came to his hometown, and his disciples followed him. And on the Sabbath he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astonished, saying, "Where did this man get these things? What is the wisdom given to him? How are such mighty works done by his hands? Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, and the brother of James, and Joseph, and Judas, and Simeon, and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. And Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his hometown, and among his relatives, and in his own household." And he could do no mighty work there, except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and healed them. And he marveled because of their unbelief. And he went about among the villages teaching. Jeff, come and preach the word.
When I was finishing college, actually while I was in college, I had the unique opportunity at the time to work at a ropes course. How many of you have ever been to a ropes course before? Okay, so you know the basic idea. You spend the day working on your fear. You working on team dynamics usually, and it was a unique opportunity that I really enjoyed, where we got to work with different groups that would come in. I think I might have even done an AIM group. I don't know, but it was actually at the land of Heath Grisso's father, and Heath was a student here and an aimer, and so it was kind of tied with our youth minister, and he had gone to some challenge courses, and so I came in and I did a lot of summers just kind of going through groups, and we had groups that would come in, and the way the day would go is a group would come in, and we would do some low elements where we would, work on team dynamics, and we'd play goofy games, and we'd talk about it, and who was the leader, who wasn't the leader, what were your strengths, what were your weaknesses, different things like that. And normally during that morning time, we would have a trust fall where someone would climb up on a platform that was about 5 feet tall, and everybody else would stand out there, and everybody'd hold their hands out and go through this ceremony. It wasn't really a ceremony, but we had a protocol that we would go through as people would fall, and that was a challenge. That part was a challenge for enough people. Just to fall back and let someone else catch you, that was a big challenge. But then we would go into the afternoon. And the afternoon was all of the high elements that were up on the poles. And the way ours was worked out is you went up and you went through about 6 or 7 different elements of climbing a pole, walking across a pole, walking across just a tight rope with one rope, and you'd get to the very end, and the very last element was a zip line. And it was a good long zip line that went down into this ravine. And it was kind of the reward. It was the ending thing of the entire thing. It didn't take near as much work. All you had to do is step off the platform and just enjoy the ride. You had something holding you. You didn't have to, there's a trapeze, but you're not, it's not holding you up. I mean, it's just kind of there for you to put your arms on something. And so you go down, but there had to be a person at the top to get you into that trapeze. Because, if you did it wrong, yes, you would fall to the ground, and it hurt really bad. So usually I would be up there, and I would make sure that person got harnessed in correctly, not harnessed incorrectly. Grammar, it's important. So inevitably, I would have somebody who would get to the end. They would have gone through all the day. They would have gone through the trust fall. They would have gone through everything else. They would have stood on on a single wire looking down at the ground, but then they got to that trapeze and that zip line, and they did not have the belief that they could go through it. And I would have to sit there and I would have to talk to them and say, no, this is fine. You can do this. You can, And we had strict rules. We were not allowed to push. We were not, even if they asked, just give me a push. No, I can't give you a push. I'm sorry. Insurance does not allow me to do that. And so we would have to wait. And there were times where, there was one time, I think we waited 45 minutes on this young lady to make a decision. And usually, I could get other people around and work them through, so it didn't hold up the line. But inevitably, it just came down to their belief, their trust in what I was saying and what they saw other people do, but they had to take that step in belief. So here we are in Mark chapter 6. Jesus has been going around. He's been doing amazing things. He's been teaching amazing things. The last chapter, he stilled the storm. He healed the demoniac. He healed the lady with the disease. He raised a girl from the dead. And there's been very little resistance. The Pharisees have made comments about the Sabbath and about the way he's doing things. But overall, the people have received all of this. And they've been receptive and they're believing. And then Jesus goes to his hometown. He goes back to Nazareth, a small town, 200 to 400 people. Has anybody lived in a town of 200 to 400 people? You kind of know everybody, right? And you know what they're like. And so Jesus faces this challenge, and not only that, but we're going to look at other ways that other people in there, what they did with their belief about Jesus. And that's kind of what these three sections that we're going to look at today deal with is what do you do with all this knowledge about Jesus? What do you do with that? And what is your belief or your unbelief? So as we get started, he's in Nazareth, and he is working with them, and they know who he is. He was raised there. They know what he can do. They admire his craftsmanship as a carpenter, but he's a carpenter. He's not a teacher. They have their preconceived ideas of who Jesus is, and they're not ready to let go of that. If you look at in verse 3, it says they took offense at him. They took offense at his teaching. The word is really the word for scandal. It's the word for a stumbling block. They allowed what they knew or thought they knew about Jesus to get in the way of what they were seeing and what they were hearing. They couldn't get past what they had fixed in their minds. How often do we allow our own prejudices and our assumptions prevent us from recognizing the work of God in our minds? How often do we miss out on God's blessing because we're too focused on our own preconceptions and expectations? I can remember one year out at White River, I was teaching a class of sixth graders. Real mature sixth graders. Anytime you're teaching junior high, you really don't know what you've got. And so we were coming up on, it was just the second day. And I threw a question out there just expecting it to be pretty flat. I said, so what are the things you guys struggle with? And Elena was in that class. And it was At first it was pretty plain. It was, well, my schoolwork, my schoolwork's hard, and got quiet, and I was like, yeah, what else? And then one young man goes, I really got to stop smoking dope. I've been doing it all, for many years, and I know it's wrong, and I got to stop. Yeah, uh-huh. Another girl says, so sometimes my dad has to take me and my sisters, and we have to go get my mom out of the bars. Wow. And all of a sudden, it just got deep real quick. And everybody just things started pouring out because somebody opened the door. I was not ready. I was not ready at all. I pray that I handled it as best I could with my eyes not bugging out as large as they were. But it was the beginning of a week of really great things. And one of the girls, the girl that had struggled so much, I kept a relationship with her for a number of years, and she always came back to, you were so kind at that, and you spoke into that and let me share. But I had to let go of my expectations of what God could do with sixth graders, right? I had to allow God to work and give him the opportunity to make some changes. We always have to remember that no matter what we think will happen, Jesus always has more. And there's always more to Jesus than what we think. Unbelief can take a lot of different forms. Sometimes we may believe in God, but we struggle with doubt and uncertainty. And this is normal. This is a normal part of our faith journey. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, doubt is not the opposite of faith. It is one element of faith. Doubting is not the problem. It's when you let your doubt turn into unbelief. Knowing and having faith in Jesus means that we no longer get to define everything for ourselves. We don't get to decide this is how the situation is going to be, because we have to let Jesus define who he is and what he wants to do with this situation. Just like all those people, those 200, 400 people who knew who Jesus who Jesus was, they had to let go of that and let him define who he was to them. But then we get to the second part of this. Mark 6, 7 through 13. Then Jesus went around teaching from village to village. Calling the 12 to him, he sent them out 2 by 2 and gave them authority over evil spirits. These were his instructions. Take nothing for the journey except a staff, no bread, no bag, no money in your belts. Wear sandals, but not an extra tunic. Whenever you enter a house, stay there until you leave that town. And if any place will not welcome you or listen to you, shake the dust off your feet when you leave as a testimony against them. So they went out, and they preached that people should repent. They drove out many demons and anointed many sick people with oil and healed them. So here you have the disciples who've watched all this go along. They've been there. They've listened to the parables. They were in the boat with Jesus. But then they saw this unbelief. And they saw things not go quite as planned in their minds with Jesus. And it's in that context that Jesus sends them out and says, okay, now you go out. You go do what you've seen me do. What you've seen me do. Would they go out and tell the great things? Would they go out and talk about how Jesus cast the demons out of the demoniac? Would they tell about the girl who was healed? Would they tell the parables? Or would this be a time where they were scared? Would they be worried about what people would say, what people would do? It was a challenge to them to believe first in Jesus, but also in what Jesus had called them to do. How many times have we failed to believe? How many times have we thought that we couldn't do it? Remember that Jesus will always lead you to something more. You can't step out in faith and stay the same. Think about coming here. Thinking about that step and coming to school. I remember when I came to school, man, it was all laid out. I knew what was going to happen. I had plans. I was going to come here. I was going to get some training, and we were going to go back and work in North Dakota because we'd worked there a couple of summers, and that's where we were going to be. Well, God changed that. And then I met Zane. And Zane and I started talking, and Zane and I started making plans, and then with another couple, and we took a trip to Argentina for a month, and we had it all planned out, and we had a strategy. We were going to plant this church, and it was going to look like a tree, and all these great things. But it didn't work out. Some of that was me, but a lot of that was God. Now, 20 years later, that's right, 20 years later, Zane and I do get to work together. Didn't see that one coming. But whenever you step out in faith, God is there to help you change. You guys are going to go back to places, and people are going to expect you to be the person that left. And you're not going to be that person. God has changed you. And God has brought you to a new place. And hopefully God will continue bringing you to new places as you step out in faith in everything that you do. Imagine the disciples. Imagine how this worked out in their lives. Can you imagine that Thomas, doubting Thomas, Jesus, you don't want me to go out there, do you? But he sends Thomas out, and Thomas, what does God do for Thomas? Well, did he embolden him by showing him that he could step out in faith? That God really would be there? What about Peter? Bold Peter, did he just hit the ground running and go out there and start preaching and then not have everyone listen to what he had to say? Did he come back maybe a little more humble, maybe a little more cautious about stepping beyond what maybe Jesus would do? We don't know. We don't know these stories, but we do know that they went and they stepped out in faith. And so now we get to the next part of the chapter. And as I said, I would have expected Mark to tell us a story about what Peter did or what Thomas did or what, any of the disciples. But instead, he tells about John and Herod. I think we kind of know the story. John goes in and tells Herod he's a sinner. And yet, and so Herod has to put him in jail. And he puts him in jail. And he is content to leave him there because Herod, as Mark tells us, believes that John is a prophet. It's interesting, the contrast between how Matthew and Mark portray this situation. Because here, Herod kind of gets it. And he's afraid. And this is kind of the first time that Mark mentions Herod by name. But if you look through, when Jesus is opposed, he's opposed by the Pharisees, and not the Sadducees, but the Pharisees and the Herodians. And so Mark uses Herod as an example of worldly unbelief. You've got the Pharisees who they have God defined. They know who God is, and they've set up the rules on how things should be done. But Herod represents that worldly aspect, those that have left God, those that aren't listening to who God is. And both of these eventually joined together to put Jesus on the cross. And so Mark is introducing this unbelief, this worldly unbelief that is exemplified in who Herod is. But Herod is scared. He is scared because he sees in Jesus that same spirit of John. He sees the power of God at work in him. And I think he's legitimately afraid that Jesus is going to come back and bring retribution upon him for the things that he did to John. It's important for us to see that this worldly unbelief, it's a threat. It's a threat for us as we go out. As you go out and speak in places, there will be threats. And I think maybe that's one of the reasons why Mark points this out, is because he's pointing out things were getting dangerous. It wasn't just Jesus healing anymore. There was opposition. There was mounting opposition to what was going on. I don't know. I have to say, it's amazing to me in a book that is so brief on so many things that Mark spends a good column in my Bible going over this story. So I'm still thinking about that, and I hope you will too. Think about why would this be included? Why in such detail would Mark go through this? Is it to prophesy something or foreshadow something further on about Jesus? I don't know. So what will happen next? Who is Jesus? He masks his truth in parables. He commands nature with his words. He tells demons to be silent. And now, faced with the death of John and rejection by his hometown, what is he going to do? What are you going to do? When Jesus shows you something new about himself, about his word, will you allow that to be a stumbling block? Like those in Nazareth, are you going to be stuck in a tradition or an old idea of how you thought it was going to be? Or like Herod, will you reject repentance because you just won't allow your beliefs to change your life? Or, like the disciples, will you go with only a command from the Lord and allow your belief in Jesus to become real to you?